Hey guys, Bice Bump here, bringing you this 11.2 Unholy Death Knight Mythic Plus guide, focusing on the Rider of the Apocalypse hero talents. Unholy is a little bit in the shadow of Frost at the moment. It is a great deal of fun to play. It deals competitive damage, but it's difficult to keep up with Frost DKs that can do insane AoE and then just keeps the full single target. Still, I recommend you guys to try it out. I've been having a lot of fun playing it, and I think it has a lot of potential in a lot of dungeons. And unless you like pushing the absolute top end, I think it's 100% viable. Interesting key, we are actually joined by Frost DK here, so I am going head to head with Frost DK. So I think you can kind of compare, okay, when is the Frost DK doing more damage than me? When is the Unholy doing more damage? That kind of thing. As always, I will talk about the talents, I'll discuss some stats and some gear, and then we'll go into talking about the rotation. So looking at the damage breakdown, talking about exactly how we execute the rotation, and some tips and tricks along that to help you achieve the maximum DPS possible in a Myth Plus environment. Anyway, starting out with talents, got them up here. I think these are really quite rigid. There really isn't that much choice. I would love to be able to pick up Improved Death Call in certain dungeons, but like there isn't that much to give up, right? You could give up Death Frost or Ebb and Fever, but both those talents are great. So it's kind of like there isn't much room. If you play Sun Lane, there's a lot more flexibility because you don't need to pick up Clone Shadows, and that gives you an extra point to spend elsewhere. But for the Rider, this is kind of like a go-to, and there's really nothing to kind of change up there. When it comes to stats, you can see I got my stats over here. It's a good balance of Mastery, Haste, and Crit. Crit used to be terrible, but they changed a lot of stuff now in Season 3, which means that Crit is actually alright. And I think a good balance, it's fine. If you want to be fancy about it, you can do like dungeon route sims, so not dungeon slice, and that could give you a better kind of view of exactly what to prioritize. But I tend to not focus too much on that and just run with something high side level and then a good balance of stats. And you can always optimize the single target if you want to get more boss damage, right? When it comes to trinkets, there are a couple of interesting options. I think you got your standard best trinkets like in Raid. You got Stone Idol is best on use. You got Antenna. You got Nether Prism, which is specifically good in with Cross with the way it stacks up. But you also have interesting things such as what I'm currently running, which is the Void Touch Fragment, which sees higher uptime in Myth Plus due to stacking when stuff dies around you. So that's an interesting option if you want to run some more passive trinkets. Anyway, that's kind of like the boring part. Let's talk about rotation and how you actually execute the Frost TK one. Like Unholy DK, sorry. First of all, I got damage breakdown up here. I thought we'd start by talking about that one to see where the damage actually comes from. We have our Magus of the Dead at the top. This is because Magus cleaves with the Medicine Magus talents that we do pick up. It deals damage to 8 targets whenever it does its Shadow Bolt, which it does most of the time. Sometimes it does Frostbolt, which is just single target. Bit annoying that it does that, but it's where it is. You get it from using your Apocalypse and your Legion of Souls, and then whenever you use Sun Doom procs, which is the reason why Sun Doom procs are so valuable in this build, is because it summons Mago, which deals a ton AoE damage. Next, we got Clone Shadows. This is just purely sitting in your Death and Decay and spamming Clone Shadows. Like, the ability on its own does a lot of damage. For reference, like Clone Shadows versus Frost Scythe. Like, Festering Scythe. You notice that I've been playing Frost lately. Festering Scythe does a lot of damage, right? But Clone Shadows is like 75% of a Festering Scythe, which is quite impressive. So just sitting down and spamming Clone Shadows is a big part of your damage throughput. We have White Mane. This is mainly from the tier set. He replicates our Epidemics and Death Calls, which is why it shows up so high. Essentially, you could bake that into Epidemic and Death Call and they will show up much higher. That's why you get that. And then you got your standard Epidemics, which is our AoE Runic Power Spender. You have Virulent Plague, which is our Dot. And Death is another Hero Talent specific one. And then down there at 6%, the Bursting Souls. That's from Bursting Wounds in AoE, which is really not high up. So there's a lot of stuff above it, but still a big focus of the Unholy DK will be bursting those wounds because it also gives us strength through the Festamite talent. So I think that's the general vibe. We get a lot of damage from Magus, Clone Shadows, Epidemics. That's like the main thing. But then there's like a big, like top damage is only 11%. So it's kind of like death from 1,000 wounds here. It's not like there's a one ability that does the majority of damage. It's a combination of abilities. Anyway, let's talk very high level. What is the goal of the Unholy Death Knight when you're in Mythic Plus? Like, what do you want to achieve to maximize your damage? And there's a couple of things. First of all, Sudden Doom procs. We talked about these. They come from your auto attacks. And whenever they show up, you want to consume them ASAP. In AoE, that's going to be Epidemic. We're talking 4+ targets. And whenever there's 3 or less, you're going to spend it on a Death Call. And that's essentially like top priority. Whenever you get Sudden Doom, just spend that immediately because you really don't want to overcap any of those. Secondly, it's about Deafening Cleave. This is also a huge part of like dealing AoE damage. Deafening, when you pop it down, just like I did there, it gives you a buff when you stand in it. Importantly, you stand in it, not when stuff actually is in it. That makes your Clone Shadows cleave to a total of 8 enemies. And that's like a huge part of your AoE damage. It's just cleaving with those Clone Shadows. We then have Epidemic usage, right? When you're done, kind of like when you can't cleave with your Clone Shadows, it's going to be spending Runic Power on Epidemic to deal damage. We also have our dots, so we're going to want to keep up our dots. And then we have our wound gameplay, which is just generating and spending those festering wounds. However, in Mythic Plus, that is mostly a passive exercise. We'll talk about Festering Scythe later, which is like the main way you actually actively apply them. But in a general sense, the part about spamming Clone Shadows is going to be like your main way of actually handling and dealing with wounds. All right, cool. So that's like your high-level overview of the goals. Let's talk about like in practice, how does it look like? What is an opener on a pack? And how does your priority change over the length of that pack? I got an opener up here, which is kind of like what you do when you have everything available to you. First thing to do is you're going to want to use a Festering Strike on an enemy when you're kind of gathering the pack. This is a good opportunity to do it. The tank usually doesn't like go in and start the pack immediately. And a Festering Strike deals literally 0 damage and allows you to set up for the apocalypse. That is the first ability you want to press in your AoE kind of burst. It does a couple of things. It summons a Magi. It also gives you the Dark Transformation buff, so it, makes your pet a much stronger, makes it apply wounds in AoE, and buffs all your other pet-related abilities with the Commander of the Dead talent. That's what we use at the start, so everything gets buffed, and all your Magi that spawn get buffed and that kind of stuff. We then follow up with Unholy Assault and Legion of Souls. We do it in this order because Legion of Souls is really a short duration ability. Like, it lasts for 12 seconds. Unholy Assault is 20. So you want to do it that way around so you get good overlap, because Legion of Souls on its own does a lot of damage. Right? That's kind of like a setup phase. So once you're done there, you go into your bursting phase. And there, you want to absolutely spam the living hell out of Clone Shadows. Like, that is how you're going to do the most DPS in a pack, because Clone Shadows doesn't only deal a lot of damage on its own, it also bursts lots of wounds, which do a lot of damage, which gives you also a big strength buff that amps up all your other damage. You're also, at this point, going to be spending all your Sudden Doom procs. So whenever you get a Sudden Doom proc, you're just going to hit that Epidemic. And then kind of when you are out of runes to spend on Clone Shadows, you're going to go to your Epidemic to kind of spend your runing power. First priority is Clone Shadows. No, first priority is Sudden Doom procs, and then Clone Shadows, and then just naked Epidemics. We will also, at this point, get Festering Scythe procs. So how that works is the Festering Scythe, it stacks up over time. You get a stack every time you burst a wound. And once you reach 20, it will empower your next Festering Strike to deal significantly more damage, do AoE damage in the frontal cone, and apply wounds to everything around in front of you. 2 to 3 on each target. This is an excellent way of applying wounds, but it tends to be sometimes too much. I think in pools, when you're using Legion of Souls on its own just applies so many wounds, it's kind of too much with the Festering Scythe. In general, and this is quite recent, I just ran some sims, Festering Scythe usage is when you have an unsaturated pack when it comes to wounds. Saturated packs is when like everything has 5 or 6 wounds on them. A Festering Scythe is kind of like a wasted button because it costs more than a Clone Shadows and it will deal less damage. So you only want to use the Festering Scythes to kind of stack up wounds when they're starting to go low, right? And this is kind of like whenever you go, when most of targets has 4 or less, because it's still valuable for a target to have 6 wounds, because when it dies, it explodes and those wounds will do damage still, right? So it's not that you want to go down to 0, but still, that's going to be the general vibe. This is very new, so I'll put it in a comment down below if I change my mind, but I think it makes a lot of sense, because yeah, Clone Shadows is just going to be a better button to press most of the time. I'm also going to say, when I'm talking about Festering Scythe, being able to carry a proc in between packs is incredibly valuable. So Festering Scythe actually lasts for a long time when it procs. I think it's like 30 seconds. So you have a proc at the end of a pack. What you want to do is avoid using it and then carry it into the next pack to use it at the start to get your kind of wound cycle going. And when I say wound cycle, I essentially mean the fact that you burst wounds, which gives you Festering Scythe stacks, which means you give more Festering Scythes, which gives you more wounds, which allows you to burst more. And you get this cycle where you're just going to keep feeding into more and more wounds. That is what you want to start as quickly as possible and then give a pack. When you have all your cooldowns, easy peasy. But if you don't, carrying a Festering Scythe is really, really good idea. Anyway, at this point, right, we are using our scythes when as appropriate. We are going to want to reuse our Death and Decay whenever that finishes. You don't have infinite uses here, by the way. So, like, if you have the Mograine proc, don't use Death and Decay to overlap. He gives you Death and Decay. Same thing with Legion of Souls gives you Death and Decay, so no reason to use it there. Only use it when you don't get it from another source and you need to keep that cleave going. But you 100% want to keep the cleave going. That's like a high priority. We also want to maintain our dots. They are going to eventually go away. You get them for free with Apocalypse, but you know they are going to go away and you need to reapply them because you need them to use Epidemic, and they also do quite a lot of damage on their own, right? But then it's just going to keep going like this, right? You're just going to be spamming your Clone Shadows, use your Sun Doom procs as appropriate, use your Runic Power when you can't use Clone Shadows, keep up your dots, keep up your Death and Decay. Furthermore, I would, if you can, use Soul Reaper to get that trigger. We are running Reaping, and if that triggers, it gives you 10% pet damage, which is a nice boost because a lot of our AoE damage actually comes from pet, both from your main pet, but also stuff like Legion of Souls, as well as your Magi. So that's definitely something to keep out for. If you can like do a cheeky Soul Reaper snipe, I would go for that. Remember, it has to actually trigger. It's not like you put Soul Reaper and a mob dies, you don't get the buff. So it has to actually trigger when the mob is below 35% health. Alright, that's kind of like Unholy in a nutshell. With your packs, we don't have Unholy Assault and Legion of Souls, you kind of do the same thing. You go in, you do that initial Festering Strike, you're going to use your Apocalypse, and then you're going to use your Death and Decay because you don't get one for free, and then you're just going to go into this spammy rotation, which is going to be lots of Clone Shadows. Sun Doom proc's going to be used in Epidemic. You're going to use Naked Epidemics when you can't use Clone Shadows, and you maintain Dot, maintain your Death and Decay. Right? I think Unholy, it's easier than you might think initially, because it's so predictive, right? You kind of know that, okay, Sun Doom procs, sure, they show up and you have to press them, but otherwise, you kind of know how many runes you have, how many Clone Shadows you're going to be using, right? It's very methodical, that kind of thing. All right. I honestly think that's kind of like the rotation. When it comes to some tips and tricks, we talked about Festering Scythe usage, we talked about Soul Reaper sniping. I would say when it comes to like cooldown management, be aggressive, right? Especially when it's those like single Apocalypse windows. Try and never delay those, right? If you ever delay like a Apocalypse window, you end up delaying your main cooldown window at the 1.5 minute mark, which is a terrible idea. And since these are 45-second cooldowns, I literally sometimes press Apocalypse when the pack is like 10%. Because the alternative is going to the next pack and then just saving it for 30 seconds to hit my race of Legion of Souls and that kind of thing. So it's fine if you have like Apocalypse, Unholy Assault, and Legion of Souls ready. Save those at the end of the pack. But if it's only Apocalypse, just send that. Like 100% you want to make the most of it. Alright, so that's Unholy. When it comes to single target, honestly, it's the same as in Raid. And it's quite simple. You're going to do a very similar opener. Festing Strike into Apocalypse, into Unholy Assault, into Legion of Souls. And then it's going to be your standard Unholy single target rotation, which is you build your wounds with Festing Strike, you burst them with Clawing Shadows, right? And then you spend your runic power. And so I'm doing procs on Deathcore. You can see it here. Festering Strike into Apocalypse, Unholy Assault, Legion of Souls. And then we're going to just do this, kind of like spend our wounds. When you use Legion of Souls, you have a lot of wounds coming in automatically, so it's going to be loads of Clawing Shadows. But when we get procs of... we're also going to use Festering Strike whenever you need to, right? Nice and easy. Just to clarify as well, Festering Strike, I only ever use that, one, when I set off for Apocalypse, or when I get Festering Strike procs. And even then, it depends on how saturated the pack is in terms of the wound level. Okay? Just to be absolutely clear how that works. Cool. I will say, a couple of things. This thing up here is not Hakili. That is just a details plugin called Action Tracker. It shows you the buttons I've been pressing so you can follow the rotation, right? This thing here is my weak aura pack. Shows you whatever I feel like I need track. You can get that if you sub to me on Twitch, and then you just join my Discord and you can get it. So I just say that because people tend to ask. We'll spend the rest of this video just doing some commentary of this dungeon. I can talk you through my choices, our cooldowns, how I use them, and so on. Bosses are pretty straightforward, and this one we do have 2 target cleave, so I will try and use my Deafening K to get that cleave when possible, right? Furthermore, Unholy Aura, the aura that increases your pet damage and stuff you stand close to, is very annoying here because I need to stand literally on top of the boss to get it. So we see me kind of running around under his feet. It's because I want that Unholy Aura uptime. You can see it's part of the weak aura package, shows up at the top left there, the little button. I'm going to be making a lot of use of mouse over both interrupts and death grips here to get the ads. Really useful to have those kind of macros. I can put them up here if you want to. So you can just use mouse over while keeping your main target as the boss to very efficiently grip and interrupt the ads that show up. I think the Frosty Gate does beat me here. I think I come a bit closer because we have good execute as Unholy. There's a lot of things that actually do work in execute. You get the reaping, of course, but the Soul Reap uses as well as an additional means that we actually are pretty good executors. I am thinking ahead here. The boss is at 15%, and I know that after this we're going to pull a relatively large pack that is quite dangerous. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use a single Apocalypse, I think, and not use more of the cooldowns because I don't think they're necessary, and it allows me to do better bursts on the next pack. I don't do this very often, but it does happen sometimes. I think it depends, like I'd say. It's a choice you make. Alright, how valuable are my cooldowns now? Or is it worthwhile to save them for another pack? You can see that I have 30 seconds of Apocalypse, but by the time we'll actually run over to the next pack, it's going to be up anyway. And that's my mentality here. 45 seconds is not a lot of time, so I will be very aggressive with my Apocalypses. You can see that engage the pack. I got 8 seconds left. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up some Festering Strike wounds in this one. I actually do carry. Oh no, I didn't. I did have a carried scythe, but it actually went away there. Anyway, I do my Festering Strike, and then I pop all my cooldowns. We did have a couple of ads coming in, so they were not kind of saturated on wounds, which is why I use my scythe quite aggressively there. But you can see there, I'm using my Sun Doom procs. I'm going to be spamming Clone Shadows. I'm going to refresh my dot there. You can see it was about to drop. And then I get this really nice feedback loop where I can then use scythes to maintain my wound level. I should really make a weak aura as well to keep track of the stack level on my scythe. But you can see here, perfect example. I get a scythe proc. The pack is about to die. I will avoid using that proc and carry it over into the next pack. Yeah. You can see I even have 17 stacks on the next one. So I can very quickly here, we gather us up, I use a scythe, I go into my standard rotation, pop down Death K and start cleaving, and I get another scythe procs really quickly. So even though I didn't have my standard like wound generator, which is like tends to be Legion of Souls, it does a lot of wound generation, I end up having a really healthy wound cycle on this pack because I go in, I have a scythe really quickly, as well as stacks from another one, and that just, it's a lot of wounds that I get. And you can see here, like even though this is like just an apocalypse pool, like I'm doing 15 million DPS from a single cooldown. Really powerful. You can kind of keep track as well how many wounds I'm bursting from the Fester Bite tracker there. I don't use it that much personally, but you know. Aggressive cooldown usage. Pack is about to die, but I just send my cooldowns honestly. I think it's your go-to option. Do you want to improve your DPS? Just be aggressive, right, with cooldown usage. Here, I think we accidentally pulled these bats. I'm not 100% sure, but I do have a scythe in the bank to use, which is pretty nice. So we're actually going to pull those, and then I can set up on that pack with a scythe, and then go with the apocalypse as well. I feel like there's not that much happening. We're going to pull this pack. I use my apocalypse and my scythe, which allows me to roll over another one very easily. Imagine this, right? For the Festering Scythe to be fully self-sufficient, right? You need 20 wounds from it. It divs 2.5 on each target. So that means that it's on like self-sufficient at 8 enemies. So if you have 8 targets, a scythe would generate another scythe once you pop those wounds. But then you also have other wound generators, like you always have your Dark Transformation running, which is going to use Infected Claws to put on wounds. So that kind of gives you like, you know, you don't need that many targets to start going into this really powerful cycle. All right, full single target. We have all our CDs here, and I think I'm actually going to end this boss at top, but we can just skip this because there's nothing too exciting happening. We use AMS to pre-immune the poisons. No, I missed that there. But we also use, importantly, our Death's Charge to avoid the pull-in. Yep. Nothing happening. Boss is dead, and then we're going to kill another pack here. We have all my cooldowns. You can see I quickly get 2 stacks of Silent Doom, but I can't use them both because I was low on ruling power. But then you just, you know, hit Clone Shadows a couple of times and you just get infinite ruling power. I'm holding my scythe until I go down a couple wounds. So I wait until I'm at 4 before I hit my scythe, just to make sure I don't overcap unnecessarily. I'm sure there's like a different level you can play around with. Do give that a go, see what works for you. But like I literally just put in sims to not use scythe if it's at 5 or 6, and it was an upgrade. So there's 100% something true about the way you do that. Right, and that's your plus 15 and the Unholy Death Knight Mythic Plus guide. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought about this video. Upvote, downvote, consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.